When you view yourself as a leader, there are some things you really need to think about, including developing, initiating the team itself. And you do this by creating job calls or delegating responsibilities. So if you're hiring a new team or a person for the team, then your job call or your like now hiring piece of literature or whatever it is needs to highlight the things that you are wanting as contributions to your existing or your new starting team. And you want to cultivate like what that team is going to look like. Your book and other literature talks about organizational families, and just be really careful about if that's how you want to present your team members their role, because the lines get very blurry between work-life balance whenever you present the team, the organizational team, as a family. It also makes people feel valued in many ways, but it gives people more responsibility than what they're getting paid for in terms of emotional labor oftentimes. So this includes like labeling certain people as like the familial roles. You might have people who you consider to be children or people who you consider to be parents. Um, Furthermore, and regardless if you use the family metaphor or not, you might run into difficult tropes, meaning like stereotypes of these lists that I've laid out here, um, in your team members. So you might recognize that you have a bully amongst your team. You might have a sniper. This is someone who is more aggressive than a bully. A bully in a team would just be like the example in the meme, making maybe friendly jokes. Are they friendly? Maybe they're not. Maybe it's bullying. But making people feel a variety of negative ways about themselves or their performance or about others. So the sniper just like goes in for the attack. I think of like a cobra strike, right? Like they're like really aggressive about it. Drama queen, we can think, I mean, this is something that we've heard in other contexts throughout our lives, just someone who wants to talk about the ongoing drama. The slacker, and you can think of the slacker as not doing their part, but also maybe like I use the word vampire here, like sucking other people's energy dry. You might have a grump, meaning that somebody is negative all the time, brings the whole vibe or feel of the environment down all the time. You might have somebody who's like stuck in the mud, a roadblock to change. You might have a distractor, someone who's always off topic, changing the subject. And you might have someone who is the patient, who is always requiring some attention for some diagnoses or another. Beyond your negative roles, you also have positive roles. The star is that one person who outperforms the responsibilities of the job. And the team player is someone who really is there who makes a positive impact on all members of the team. As a leader, also, you will often give feedback, and that's difficult sometimes, especially if you're feeling like you're in a rut or if you're feeling less enthusiastic about your job. So I have felt this as in my role as like a teacher, not necessarily right now, but like in the past when things just pile up and then you have to give feedback on top of all of your other responsibilities. But feedback is so important in order to make your team or the members of your organization or your employees or your subordinates, whatever it is, because this is a very broad context of a class, whatever they are in terms of your leadership, it is so important to give constructive feedback. And that doesn't mean purely positive, and that doesn't mean purely negative feedback. Some ways to keep yourself from falling into like a feedback trap where it's just it's like the job, right? It's like you might write on somebody's thing like good job without any other context. Then you can start thinking of things in terms of performance improvement plans. So you can identify certain things that they can improve on, and that will keep you from just reverting back to the standard, whether it's low or not. It's really important to praise when it's appropriate, but it's also important to hold team members accountable and enact consequences. And I wrote scripting here because we should develop these scripts in order to delegate consequences, because if we don't have those existing scripts in place, depending on the current situation that the leader is in, it can emotions and or situations and or context can negatively impact the feedback that we provide as leaders when we're trying to hold members of the group accountable. And we also want to motivate through feedback. So like, not just a great job, but like, great job, you're doing amazing work, blah, 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 whatever it is. Make sure that it motivates your employee or whomever, whatever label we're putting on it, in a way that makes them want to do their job even better than they already are. Lastly, we'll talk about public image. So public image is verbal and nonverbal. It's what you present to others. So just for a few examples of like relevant branding for past political presidential candidates, from George Bush was the least recent. Joe Biden is the most recent. We can see how that these branding images relate or relay things to the audience in different ways, like what's important versus what's not. So if we look at Hillary for America, you'll notice for Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden in this particular case, they're highlighting their first names. And this is really interesting in political communication, especially like in women's and gender studies too. Generally speaking, leaders, and primarily political leaders who are women, usually get called by their first names, whereas males in political power positions often get referred to by their last names, which is problematic for many reasons that we will not get into in this course. However, we have George Bush from our 2004 presidential election. You'll see the W, and you might have seen, if you were in the political scene during this time, which some of you were and some of you weren't. But the W is his middle name, which distinguishes him from his father, George H. Bush. So that's an interesting way of making yourself distinct from others, particularly your father. But it's super interesting in what's presented to the audience. And for President Obama, of course, there was a lot of talk about hope, a lot of talk about change, a lot of campaigning around optimism and things like that. So that's what was presented. So it's all about managing your image, which we refer to as impression management. So this is just like what we present to others based on how we want them to see us, right? And that's where branding comes in too. In this chapter, or in this part 4, I guess, we talked about chapter 8, chapter 9, and chapter 10. You also have assignment 4 due on Sunday by 11:59 p.m. You're writing 2 things. You're writing a professional email in a Word document, as well as a cover letter for that ideal job you wrote about in assignment 1. Instructions are on eCampus, and then you'll have quiz 4 that's due by Friday at 11:59 p.m.